John Locke's Second Treatise of Government, a classic in political philosophy and a very influential text. It's a rich text, and there's so much in it that we couldn't possibly go over it unless this were going to be a very long video, in any kind of detail at least. So let's content ourselves with a very brief introduction to some aspects of the text. First, social contract theory. Let's get the gist of this down and place Locke in relation to others in the social contract tradition. Note that the social contract tradition is associated with early modern philosophers John Locke, Thomas Hobbes, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Note also, however, that the social contract tradition does not necessarily originate here, nor does it end there. John Rawls, more recently, has been a sort of social contract theorist. And in ancient philosophy, the Epicurean tradition and Plato's Crito have social contract theories, or at least precursors to social contract theories at a minimum. Now, social contract theory is associated with the idea of the state of nature, which is the idea of the state of human beings without government. In Locke, Hobbes, and Rousseau, the understanding of nature shapes our understanding of government. The political theory advocated by the social contract theorist is influenced by that theorist's view of human nature. So Rousseau has an optimistic view of nature. He has an optimistic view of human nature and of the state of nature, life without government. And accordingly, he shapes his theory of government to fit this theory of human nature. He's a subtle thinker, and I'm not sure I'm able to explain him properly, certainly not in a brief video on Locke, so perhaps some other time. Briefly, let it suffice to say, Rousseau has an optimistic assessment of the state of nature, and his political theory is shaped accordingly. Hobbes is different. Hobbes is a very pessimistic fellow, at least in his assessment of nature, both human nature and the state of nature. He thinks the state of nature, life without government, is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. It's terrible. It's a state of constant violence, and this determines his political philosophy. It is his political philosophy, part of it, but it determines the rest. It determines his theory of government, which is absolute monarchy. He thinks we need a government with absolute power because the state of nature, with its incessant horrible violence, requires a government to take us as far away from that as possible. That means a government as powerful as possible. So absolute monarchy is the best way to escape the violence inherent in this state of nature, according to Hobbes. Locke is in between these two. Locke has an optimistic assessment of human nature, but not quite as optimistic as that of Rousseau. I should say the state of nature. An optimistic assessment of the state of nature, much more optimistic than Hobbes, but less so perhaps than Rousseau. And this shapes his theory of government. The state of nature is good. There's a moral law to govern it, Locke says, and there's a lot to like about the state of nature. It's got one major drawback. There's not a very efficient protection of property rights in the state of nature, and so we form governments to protect our property rights more efficiently. We form society, individuals give up their own right to protect their own property rights by themselves. They give that right up in exchange for the communal, social, cooperative protection of property rights, which is more efficient. That's the general idea of the social contract in Locke. Now, understand that the state of nature has, as I said, a moral law to govern it, and understand that this moral law gives us certain rights, and these rights are life, liberty, and property. Life, liberty, and property are inalienable rights, using the language of the Declaration of Independence from American history, a very Lockean document. Life, liberty, and property are rights that the human being simply has in virtue of his existence. And these rights pre-exist government. The government exists to protect these rights, and it cannot take them away, at least not without being an illegitimate government. A legitimate government must protect the rights to life, liberty, and property. Now, these rights are inherent in human nature, and they can't be separated from it, except in a few certain, very specific circumstances. You can forfeit your right to life by making war on someone else, for example. There are these exceptions. They're not 100% inalienable. Then there would be no such thing as violence in self-defense. You'd never be able to take away the right of a murderer, the life of a murderer. Okay, so social contract theory between Hobbes and Rousseau in the optimistic assessment of nature, the state of nature, the idea of rights, pre-existing government, and which government exists to protect. That's Locke. Now, Let's look at this in a little more detail. Let's go from the bottom to the top, as it were. Locke says a legitimate government operates by the consent of the people. Again, the Declaration of Independence is a very Lockean document. Governments derive such power as they have, as are just powers, from the consent of the governed. And this is necessary because the consent of the governed is what will make the best protection of property rights. So government is rooted in property rights. Where are property rights rooted? Well, they're rooted in human rights. Property rights in Locke are a species of human rights, or property rights are a derivation or an instance of human rights. Humans labor, humans work. And when we work on something, when we, as Locke says, mix our labor with something, we make it our property. Labor is the root of property. Now, this labor is an improvement. It is an improvement in things that exist in the state of nature. Back to the state of nature. The state of nature is not only something in which we may find ourselves without government. The state of nature is also something in which we find inanimate objects and other non-human things. Wood, rock, stone, trees, cows, animals, land, all of these things exist in a state of nature until we human beings come along, the managers of creation, until we come along and improve them and make them useful to us. They exist in the state of nature. And when we come along and improve them and make them useful to us, we use our own bodies, which we own because of our own human rights to ourselves. We use our bodies to work on these things, and we make them better, and we make them useful for human beings, and this makes them ours. Labor is the foundation of property rights. Now, human rights plus labor are the foundation of property rights, or humanity itself, which includes the labor of our own bodies, which we own, is the root of property rights. So what about these human rights and this value of human beings? Where does that come from? It comes from God. Moving from the bottom to the top, government is legitimate if it operates by consent of the governed, because this is what is necessary to protect property rights. Government exists to protect property rights. Property rights come from human rights, and human rights come from God. Let's see, I believe it's chapter 2 and chapter 5 of the Second Treatise of Government are where Locke tells us that human rights come from God. Property rights are a species of human rights. Human rights are a species of divine rights. Human beings are special in God's creation. God also has a right to what he has labored on. God created us, and so we are God's property. Now, of course, God also created the trees. God created the animals. God created the land. They're also God's property, but we are special among God's property. Now, human rights derive from God's human rights derive from human value, and human value derives from God's inestimable valuing of humanity. God values human beings. Now, why does God value human beings? Here I have a suspicion that Locke is not very specific for a reason. He's not very specific. He doesn't tell us a whole lot about why human beings are valuable to God. He just tells us that God does value us. And he says something about human faculties. Here we presume he means reason and free will in particular. But he doesn't go into any detail. He might have said this. He might have said human beings are the image of God, because that's what's written in the Bible. It's there in the Torah. God created human beings in his own image. And it's because we're the image of God that God values us, and that's why we have our inestimable human value and the human rights, and the property rights that derive therefrom. But he doesn't say that. He doesn't say that because I think he wanted to craft a political theory that would be as versatile as possible in his political context. He wanted it to be appealing to Protestants, Catholics, deists, Muslims, Jews, as many people as in his society could accept it. I don't think he's lying as such. There are people who read political philosophers and suspect them of lying at every turn. I don't do that. I do suspect them, however, of being attentive to their political context, and I suspect them of perhaps being a little cautious here and there. In some cases, a little sneaky, perhaps. Locke may have some other views on this. A Christian or a Jew or a Muslim might take the remarks in the Torah, or a Muslim might take it from the Quran about the human being being the image of God and say this is why God values us, because we are God's image. But Locke does not do that, because then he'd leave out the deists. Locke wants a versatile political theory, and so he says that God is the source of human value, but he doesn't say why God values us in any kind of detail. Now, we can get an answer out of Locke's writings, I think. If you look in other texts by Locke, his large epistemology book in particular, I believe it's called The Essay Concerning Human Understanding. If you check that text, you'll find him saying things like, we human beings can know God by means of reason. So in the Second Treatise of Government, we have reason, and that is a faculty making human beings different from everything else God created, and God values us more than these things. Well, probably it's because we have reason, and reason is valuable to God because it's how we know God. So consider the different faculties of created things. A tree can grow, but it doesn't know anything. An animal might know something, but it doesn't have reason, and it doesn't know me. I value a dog more than I value a plant, but the dog doesn't know me quite as well as a human being can. I value a child more than I value a dog, and in part at least, that might be because the human can know me better than the dog. I think maybe this is part of what Locke is thinking. It's because of human reason that we can know God, and it's because we can know God that we are valuable to God. And let's go from the top to the bottom now. God is the source of value. Because we can know God, we are valuable to God, and because we are valuable to God, we have rights, and because we have human rights, we have property rights, and because we have property rights, we need a government to protect them. That's the source of legitimate government and the purpose of legitimate government, and because that is its purpose, we need a government which operates by the consent of the governed. Thus says John Locke.